Greeting, stranger. Welcome back topside. I see the rain has settled onto the ground this morning, leaving the air misty, the river swollen, and the grasses wet with dew. This is quite typical in Andoran, though I expect to see the water turn to frost as we progress even farther north. I think it is high time to continue our tour of Andoran. This morning I would draw your attention away from Arensfell and turn it instead eastwards. I appreciate that on this particular morning you cannot see very much, but give it a few hours for the sun to burn the clouds apart, and you will bear witness to the vast expanse known as the Carpenden Plains. These are millions of acres of rolling land, ranging from the grain fields in the south to the vineyards in the north, and every last one is considered part of Andoran's true heartland. Almus may be the political and economic centre of the nation, and Arensfell may be the oldest region, but today neither would survive for long without the constant bounty of the plains flowing into their pantries and granaries. So, permit me to tell you about Carpenden, both the eponymous capital and the plains that fuel it. Many outsiders barely give this region a second look. After all, what's one wheat field compared with the next? Yet, I think even an area as supposedly sleepy and sheltered as this can surprise you. It shares a long, difficult border with the ancient Verdurden forest, which you will soon come to learn is full of dangerous magic and fae considered fickle even by their own high standards. Even if you avoid the forest by swooping south, you will soon reach the river Selen, which marks Andoran's eastern border shared with Taldor. The two nations have an even, amicable relationship for the most part, but who knows for how long such a peace will last. So, are you ready? Perfect. Then let's get started. Firstly, I want to discuss the tricky science of meteorology. You see, broadly speaking, the Carpenden Plains can be divided into two areas, the north and the south. Culturally, there is very little to justify such a distinction, and geographically they appear almost identical at first glance. But once you experience the weather, you quickly learn the difference. The southern plains are close to the inner sea and have never been shaded by trees. Consequently, the frequent rains, direct sunlight, and loamy soils have made them perfect for agriculture. Almost every acre is occupied by fields of wheat, barley, and other grains. There are very few major settlements in the southern plains, with local folk instead favouring innumerable hamlets and independent farmsteads, too humble to grace any maps. In contrast, the northern plains were once covered by the westernmost reaches of the Verdurden forest before Andoran lumberjacks advanced in their search for profit, and the now exposed fields are better for grazing than growing. The grass there is tufty and short, the verdant hedgerows replaced by thorny shrubs, and the winds become harsher as you approach the Five Kings Range to the north. The soil likewise turns rocky, making it increasingly difficult to farm anything except grapes, and consequently the fields and farms are replaced almost entirely with vineyards by the time you reach Sauerton. If you have ever had the misfortune of tasting the vintage known as Sauerton Red, well, this is whenceforth it comes. Do not mistake me, you will still find farming settlements in North Carpenden, but they quickly inspire little more than pity after viewing the success of the southern wards. But let us discuss the North's one lifeline, the city of Carpenden itself. It comprises 7 hills that thrust into the sky with uneasy coordination, the eastern ones being rather taller than their western siblings. In ages past, settlers to the region founded a separate community on every hill, each utterly determined to operate without the assistance of the others. A fierce rivalry soon followed, often erupting into riots. To keep the peace, Andoran authorities were compelled to dispatch ever more soldiers to the troubled city, accidentally turning it into a major military outpost in the process. Today, Carpenden's own struggle for its identity has cooled from a bellicose tragedy into a bemusing cultural tradition, represented most obviously by the annual Moonmelon Festival. At the height of summer, a 5-day frenzy erupts in the townsfolk, who pelt one another with the overripe fruits before gods and men for the honour of their hill. the most belligerent team earns the favour of the Consul Marshal, who leads the local garrison, and they migrate headquarters to the Winner's Hill until the next maelstrom. The victorious citizens, meanwhile, earn the privilege to wear red hats for the following month, and to laud their success over the defeated. You can be sure that nobody ever chooses to waive that particular right. The hills themselves can each boast of a unique culture and tradition, though they all share immense pride in their patch of paradise compared to those living beyond the safety of the city walls, which are very well defended. Recall the Andoran military presence. It is actually around 1/3 of the nation's entire standing army. Barracks and supporting infrastructure have been erected in almost every valley. The entire city is overrun with soldiers. Still, once you rise a little higher onto the slopes of the hills themselves, the real city begins. Let's start with the largest, Carpenden Hill itself, located in the northeast of the city. With no competition, it receives generous amounts of direct sunlight, and so its broad slopes are ideal for growing grapes and olives. Indeed, nary a stray square foot can be found whose area is not entirely concerned with the growing of one of these two goods, unless it is instead dedicated to one of the large houses ringing the hill's crest, or to the central manse called Moot Hall, held in reserve for the current magistrate. Generous public gardens accompany Moot Hall, enjoyed by Carpenden Hillers particularly in the twilight hours, to ponder on the meaning of their lot in life, vintage in hand. As you may have already surmised, Carpenden Hill is perhaps the wealthiest district in the city, with a small population reliant on the labour of other districts tilling their soils to survive. This does mean they rarely win the Moonmelon Festival though, and yes, this hill did give its name to the city as a whole, which in turn paid it forwards to the rest of the region. In Moot Hall, the magistrate holds forth on Carpenden Hill in the city of Carpenden, capital of the Carpenden Plains. Quite a layered approach, no? Well, in any case, the next district is Colline, to the south of Carpenden Hill. Colline is not quite as wealthy as its big sibling to the north, but it can boast of receiving more sunlight, the most, in fact, of any in the city. Colonites long ago decided to dedicate themselves entirely to the practice of olive farming, and consequently, walking along its slopes is rather pleasant, being shaded at every turn by large olive trees. These are harvested only after reaching a rich, black hue, and are subsequently dispatched to neighbouring Arensfell for curing before being put to market. Colline olives are famous in Andoran, and the current district magistrate, one Ranette Kimbar, has big plans for the district's economic future. Moving clockwise along the southern wall, we next encounter the hill called Arensfell. It has become almost entirely dependent on Colline because its economy is dedicated to the curing of Colline olives, and to the procurement of staggering quantities of salt to facilitate this. The benefit of this dependence is that Arensfellers have plenty of space for themselves, and the many terraces you will see upon entering the district are for once constructed with people and not plants in mind. Their homes are spacious and well lit, which irritates the rival hills folk to no end. Also, because salt is not available in the city, Arensfellers are always dispatching large caravans southwards to secure the resource, and it provides excellent income for a veteran adventurer seeking work in the area, in case you were interested. The next district is called Beacon, and it lies in the centre of the city. It is, I believe, the smallest hill by surface area, and does not receive as much sunlight as its eastern neighbours, so its residents have turned to specialised agriculture. The city's prized moonmelons are mostly grown by beaconers on the northern slopes, which have been carefully partitioned and trellised. Considered a local delicacy, moonmelons are cousins to the watermelons you are likely familiar with already, and are so named for their ghostly pale skin. They strike the palate as overwhelmingly sour even before fouling, and they begin to ferment only a few days after ripening. Therefore, preserving and transporting a moonmelon any great distance is prohibitively expensive, and that makes Carpenden one of the few places you will be able to try their recipes without bankrupting yourself in the process. Moving northwards, the next district is Ranette Hill. Ranking squarely central in the wealth hierarchy, Ranette Hillers mostly grow grapes, both for the table and for the winery, though they have diversified recently into other delicacies as well. When I visited a number of years ago, there was considerable interest and rumour circulating about a resident there called Janiah Cruz, who ostensibly recovered from leprosy through the power of faith alone, and thereafter gained prophetic powers. Many livestock were being brought onto Ranette Hill to be slaughtered and have their entrails read by this enigmatic survivor, though alas, I never had the chance to meet him myself. I wonder if he still lives there. Anyway, where was I? Ah yes, the final two hills, Westhill and Tildencrest, the runts of the proverbial litter. Let's begin with Westhill, the district occupying the northwest of the city. It is much smaller than its siblings and thus experiences very little direct sunlight, almost none, in fact, during the winter months. Therefore, Westhillers took to farming not plants, but animals, though of course larger beasts of burden like cows were totally out of the question. No, chickens, goats and sheep fuel the local economy there. Meat and eggs and wool provide Westhillers with dependable but very modest income, and many younger siblings, unable to inherit sufficient land to sustain a family, depart for distant lands, which in Carpenden can just mean the next town, or join the military. Consequently, martial traditions run just as thick in Westhillers' blood as agricultural ones. The final district is Tildencrest. Its tradition stands out among the others for being mostly unrelated to agriculture, as most Tildencresters are woodworkers, carpenters, or work in a small but growing lumber industry. Every home needs furniture after all, beds to sleep in and tools to work with. Tildencrest provides both. The obvious problem is that the Carpenden Plains provide very little in the way of lumber, and so, more than any other district, the residents of Tildencrest are used to venturing into the outside world to seek this valuable commodity. Many a caravan master has been contracted to pass through the settlements of Andoran's other regions to order timber supplies on behalf of the district. Together, the districts combine into a functional, if bizarre, settlement that is well worth a detour if you do not find yourself constantly called to other places. Nevertheless, there are yet more sites of interest located on the plains if you desire another kind of distraction. To the north of Carpenden, for example, lies the aforementioned settlement of Sauerton, nestled in the heart of its sprawling vineyards. Sauerton Red is celebrated by the common folk as the strong drink of the people, though it might pain them to learn that almost all of the 10,000 acres of vineyards around the township are in fact owned by a single person, the mayor of Sauerton, Tercio Andares. Still, the vintage is cheap and offers well-paid seasonal work to Andorans, who swell the town's population to bursting when the grapes become ready to harvest. The largest settlement after Carpenden, however, is instead Triela, which lies along the coast close to the mouth of the River Selin, which flows southwards from the foreboding Verduren forest. Logging efforts there send timber downstream to a camp that itself lies just east of the small port, and thus indirectly provides it with plenty of trade. Moreover, its strategic location within the Star Bay has made Triela an attractive destination for merchants as well as pirates and privateers. Once they stagger from their vessels into town, there is little difference between these latter two groups, and the mayhem that follows in their drunken footsteps makes national headlines at least once a season. In fact, the buildings by the docks, catering to the sailors as they do through brothels, bars and gambling halls, have come to be known as the Skids by the permanent residents. I would be remiss not to clarify that the Skids represents only a tiny proportion of the port's area, yet it often seems the case that the entirety of the town revolves around it. The final point of interest in the Carpenden Plains, for now at least, lies about halfway between Almas and Carpenden City. It is the tiny village of Occarin. Population, scarcely over 200. Landmarks, none, save a particularly large and well-maintained inn that caters to the many caravans ferrying goods between the two cities. Rumours, none. Nobody seems to have a bad word to say about Occarin. Its folk are warm and welcoming, its fields sufficient and well-maintained. But that is precisely what caught my attention. If there is one thing all adventurers learn, it is that there is no such thing as a perfect village, especially a perfect village along a prime trade route. So I investigated and discovered that every single villager has an extremely rare condition called heterochromia. Their eyes have different colours. Many of these are not normal colours for their ancestries either, but brilliant shades of violet, gold or grey. Clearly, the villagers are changelings. However, in every other respect, the villagers are demographically normal. By this I simply mean that the distribution of their genders, ages, and other ascriptive characteristics are akin to any arbitrary human settlements. As I have explained in previous discussions on hags, most changelings experience a compulsion to find their mothers during adolescence, a phenomenon called the call. Under normal circumstances, this is so universal and powerful that it skews changeling demographics in favour of young females. There is some nuance I must neglect here, but regardless, Occarin thus represents a mystery within a mystery. Why is the village changeling dominated? And why are the changelings seemingly unaffected by the call? My investigations did not quite have the reach or power to solve it, but I am certain there exists a powerful coven of hags in the vicinity around Occarin, stewarding the townsfolk to ends unknown. To seasoned adventurers, this would represent a thrilling and doubtless perilous investigation. However, be extremely cautious before deciding to pursue it. A lone hag is dangerous, but a coven is lethal to all save the most skilled and best prepared warriors. Well, stranger, that is an overview of the Carpenden Plains and its highlights. The region is not as idyllic as it first appears, but neither does it comprise death around every corner, unlike certain other areas of the world I could name. It serves as a true breadbasket for adventurers just as well as regular folk. I encourage you to take some time to explore its quiet corners and hidden brooks if you can spare the time. For now, though, we must press on upriver towards Darkmoon Vale. Let's take in the scenery for a time. Take it from someone who has seen mountains of fire and fields of ice beyond count. Sometimes the most impressive landscape is the one that you could call home. I'll call you again in an hour or so. Well, until then.